Okay. Hey, everybody. This is Karan from San Francisco, California.
And this is Alex from Los Angeles, California. And welcome to Movies That Shaped Us, a journey of self discovery through a shared love of film. We're two longtime friends who grew up on opposite sides of the globe with very different backgrounds. We're both shaped and are still being shaped by the movies that we see and love. And each episode will cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through three of our favorite movies. We won't be sharing our lists in advance, so you'll read along with us as we learn about each other through the selected movies. And we hope these movies and topics are fun and revelatory to you, just like they've been to us. So, Karan, what are we talking about today?
All right. So today's topic is movies that made us food people. Um, why we chose this topic, just a quick one before I pass it to you, is because food mean a ton to us, and movies have played a huge role in drawing this connection and relationship that we have with food. So, with that in mind, Alex, what is your relationship with food, and how have movies shaped it? And really, what framework did you use for coming up with your list?
Yeah. So, food is an important, well, obviously, it's an important part of my life because I have to eat it to live. But I do enjoy food from, like a foodie perspective. First of all, I'll just say, like, I'm not a cook, so I'm definitely not approaching this at all from the I like to make food part of it. I enjoy eating it. I just don't really have the patience for cooking. And it's really, certain meals are, yes, they're about just sustenance. Okay, I have to eat this breakfast or whatever to start my day. But a lot of these meals that I do have are really, important. I seek out food that I like. It's important who I'm eating with, where I'm eating. The whole context of that is really, is an event basically in my life. And there's a lot of important memories and moments that I have that are really around food. And like I said, I think this is a really fun topic that we got to explore. And when I was really thinking around how I would put my list together, I was thinking about how I evolved into becoming what you would call a foodie. It was not always like that. Did not always have this appreciation for food. And I was thinking about the moments in my life where I really felt there was like this evolution towards having this respect for food. And funnily enough, there were movies actually that were a large part of that evolution. So once I teed up, okay, these are the times that I really feel like I was stepping more closer to becoming someone who could appreciate food in this way. There were movies right there that we'll get into that kind of helped me push me in that direction. So it's really fun putting this list together. It made me hungry too a little bit. What about yourself? How'd you think about this?
That's awesome. So I grew up in a very foodie family. My mom made food from really all over the world. We ate out a lot, going out, coming back on the drive back, dissecting the food, talking about flavors, recreating stuff at home was a big part of growing up. However, I had never cooked anything myself until my late 20s. It was very much a passive experience about appreciating food and just being a part of this household that cared about food. And so my way into this list was, how did movies push me towards actually starting to cook and adopting food and making it a big part of my life, and sort of turning the dial from passive appreciation to active involvement to food is life, food is love, all of that. So that is sort of my progression on my list with movies. So yeah, it made me really hungry as well. Was kind of moving, honestly, thinking about this list, because it took me back to so many moments. And like you were saying, so much of food is about not just about cooking and eating, but it's about the shared context and the memories that you make while doing all of that. So yeah, very excited to share this with you.
Cool.
So with that said, actually, what has been a memorable food experience that you might have had lately?
Yeah, so actually, last night I went out to this new restaurant in Los Angeles, Isima, that's opened about 2, 3 weeks ago. It's like Mediterranean style food at the Le Pere Hotel down in West Hollywood. Just amazing atmosphere, great vibe. But the food was just, I had this lamb ratatouille that was one of the best pastas I've ever had in my entire, like, top five pastas. just unbelievable. And I'm still kind of high off that meal, even less than a day later. It just was phenomenal. But again, like it was but the atmosphere was great. The vibe was great. Had a live DJ that was there right by poolside outside. It was gorgeous. What about yourself?
That sounds amazing. I'm jealous. I think for me too, it would have to be a pasta dish. This is about maybe a month and a half ago. One of my really good friends who used to live in San Francisco and has now moved to Austin. She was visiting. We both are big food people. We both are big movie people as well. That's really how our friendship started a few years ago. And I hadn't seen her in like 2 years. So this was our reunion, during COVID times and such. And so we went to an Italian restaurant. We basically ordered three pastas: cacio e pepe, a lamb ragu, and I'm forgetting the third one. And we basically downed it all. The food was amazing at this place called Que Fico in San Francisco, but really it was a complete experience of sitting there, warm lighting, connecting with your friend, reminiscing over the last year, what's gone on, what's to come, and tasting this great food as we went along. So it was kind of a perfect night in that sense. And maybe after a long time, I'd actually eaten out in that way as well. So I think that probably made it extra special.
Cool.
Okay, so hopefully people are starting to get hungry already. So with that said, Alex, do you want to start with your number three?
Sure. And my number three choice on this list is a 2004 documentary, Super Size Me, directed by Morgan Spurlock. Plot summary: while examining the influence of fast food industry, Morgan Spurlock personally explores the consequences on his health of a diet of solely McDonald's food for 1 month. Now, why I chose this film, it's actually interesting hearing about your framework, about you always having this experience of being a foodie. Your parents, same way, kind of grew up in that atmosphere. Definitely was not the same for me at all. So I grew up in Boston. My mom cooked a lot, but it wasn't. My parents weren't like adventurous eaters at all. Like my diet and what she would cook, which is she's a great cook, but it was very much like the standard American suburban types of meals, like a lot of casseroles, burgers, chicken fingers, like very standard, fare. And I had not really, we also ate not a lot, but fast food was regularly on the diet. Go to McDonald's maybe once a week, Wendy's, Burger King. And that was the cuisine and the palate that I inherited when I went off to college in Los Angeles. Still would be, fast food pretty regularly. Like I said, I wasn't really cooking much. And when I did, it would be, hot dogs, chicken fingers, very basic, frozen pizzas, things that were very basic. So this movie, when it came out, I saw it for the first time when it came out in theaters. I was just graduated from college, and it was very interesting, like revelatory in terms of realizing, wow, like this food actually is not healthy for you. And so basically, again, like Morgan Spurlock, eats McDonald's for a month, and you see his body just get transformed. Obviously, he gained weight, very unhealthy. Like, did some tests at the end, and you really showed that. But what was also interesting to me was he get into a little bit like the science of the food too, and how these companies like McDonald's, Burger King, really any company that makes processed foods, they're designing the food to taste good, but also be addicting in a way. And it really made me think about, okay, I have to really be looking at what's in this food that I actually am eating. All these chemicals, all these ingredients. And I was like, wow, this is actually not, I wasn't necessarily doing it for a health reason, like I have to lose weight or, I was very unhealthy. But I started looking at what I was eating and realizing, like, again, this food was designed to be addicting and not necessarily to taste good. And actually seeing that film, what I started doing, and I still do this in the similar fashion even to this day, is just cutting things out of my diet. So I started being very aware of, okay, so cutting down on sugars, stopped eating fast food, haven't drank soda since seeing this movie. Like a lot of these things I started removing from my diet. And even to this day, like I start cutting down on, maybe I don't drink as much milk as I really should, stay away from certain, white flours. So every couple of years I'm thinking, well, maybe there's something else to kind of eliminate from my diet that's not really that healthy. So it really was this movie actually that made me kind of wake up to needed to pay attention a little bit more about what I put in me, and to see food as something that wasn't so, as just something that was for sustenance. So this really started this journey that eventually led to me becoming someone who then appreciates food. But the first step for me was realizing, okay, what am I eating? What is in this stuff? And then starting to shift my diet away from, processed foods, fast foods. And then you'll see actually my list sort of does progress chronologically, because my journey was really something that happened over time as I became more to appreciate food. But this definitely for me, like for sure, was the beginning part of that. Like if I had not seen this movie, I don't know whether I had that wake up call that kind of put me on that journey, because I was not had the same background as you at all of being adventurous and trying a bunch of different types of food growing up. And this movie, I think, was a major spark in going on that journey for myself. So have you seen the film?
Yeah, I have seen the film. It's been a while. I haven't seen it in years and years, but it makes sense. It sounds like this movie was like a reset for you. My relationship with this movie is interesting because I didn't grow up in a big sort of fast food culture. That said, growing up in India, there is a lot of unhealthy food all around you. It's a very carb heavy diet. It can be, extra on the spices and the oil and such, especially if you eat out. But at home, at least, our food was, I think, as healthy as it could be. That said, there's still more to do there and still is. So for me, this movie was not so much of a reset point the way it might have been for you. But I did see it, I think, once I had moved to the US. So it was more of just a window into life and culture in the US, and connecting the dots of the people who were around me, why it was hard to shake old habits in people. So, for example, at grad school, I was always wanting to do small group dinners with different people, and I wanted to pick the weirdest places or cuisines that I'd never seen. And I could see a lot of people were very hesitant to that. And watching this movie was, in a way, for me, a way to empathize that, oh, if you've grown up with a certain set diet, and this could happen really anywhere, it doesn't apply to only the US. It's really hard to shake that. So it sounds like you sort of really intentionally did that, and this movie kind of became a gateway into that, which is awesome.
Yeah, definitely. And it wasn't necessarily about so much for me the health, but that was definitely Morgan Spurlock's aspect of approaching this. It just made me see food more, at least in the US, or how maybe we view food here, as like commodification of, hey, this is just something for you to eat, to then consume more of it, to buy more of it. That part of it was like, like the food shouldn't really be about that, and how can I start moving away from that particular type of relationship with food? So that was really the spark for me. Though obviously it is a healthy thing to do to not eat these food, but for me that was really the wake up call. So yeah, what about you? What's your third choice?
All right. So my third choice, and this was a hard one. I think the hardest time I had was picking up number 3, is a movie called Big Night from 1996. The IMDb synopsis is: New Jersey, 1950s, two brothers run an Italian restaurant. Business is not going well as rival Italian restaurant is out competing them. In a final effort to save the restaurant, the brothers plan to pull on an evening of incredible food. The movie stars Stanley Tucci, Tony Shalhoub as the brothers, and a whole bunch of other great folks in there. Directed by Campbell Scott and Stanley Tucci, and written by Stanley Tucci as well. So kind of a tour de force on his part. So I watched this movie, I think in the late 2000s, I want to say, or maybe even early 2010s. I can't remember exactly. But for me, this movie kind of exemplifies this tension between staying true to your roots as a food person once you know enough about it, versus what the people around you expect from you. And those people could be friends, those people could be customers in this scenario because it's a business. And it's a very funny movie, of course, and very entertaining and scrumptious and all of that. But I think of all of my picks, this is the movie that has a bit of that darker edge to it because of this tension. Because as you get more and more familiar with food, you start eating at restaurants that are one of those, multi-course, multi-cuisine restaurants, which I've been lucky to have a chance to do. You can start to cross over a little bit to the side where food starts to become a little bit too precious, and I think that's the essential tension here between the two brothers. And at the same time, how do you stay authentic to what you're preparing and what you're cooking? So I think I watched this movie in my life when I think I started to cook already and I started to get into food in a bigger way. And I watched this movie and it sort of hit home in that sense because I was starting to cross over to that side a little bit where if I went along with people who didn't appreciate the food the way it was meant to be, I would get a little bit, sour. or and such. And I think I've had a journey since to try and include people and show them a way and help them get into it in a way. It doesn't have to be door slam the door in their face policy, which is sort of where I started to get to a little bit in that early time because I was kind of freshly getting all into it and excited and such. So that's what this movie represents to me. But then it also really underscores and underlines how family and food and the two bonds kind of underline each other. Ultimately, this is a story of these two brothers and how they support each other and how they almost have this unspoken food language. While one of them is preparing a risotto, the other one already has the next ingredient chopped up and ready without even saying that. And I think I've experienced that with my mom and my sister, who is a baker now. When I go back home, there is sort of this shorthand that's already developed. And I think it's partly because your family members, but partly also because food is underlying that. So I think that really spoke to me here. And then last but not the least, the final dinner scene in this movie where everybody's on this table, this amazing, delicious Italian food, people of all walks of life, all races and ethnic backgrounds and social backgrounds and such are there having a good time. The older I get, I realize that yes, food is about enjoying the delicious flavors of it and the fun and the joy you get in cooking, but the ultimate pleasure is really breaking bread with family and friends. And I think that dinner scene really exemplifies that for me. It's sort of become like a pick me up scene when I'm a little bit down in life now. I just go and watch that dinner scene. It somehow just feels that all the problems that people have dissipated for that hour, 2 hour long period because you're just connected. And I think good food, yes, is meant to be appreciated on itself, but it creates this foundation for great connection to happen. So that's why this movie is important to me. And not to mention that everybody is great in the cast. Stanley Tucci is amazing. People whose careers I've followed since watching this movie. So that's my number 3, Big Night.
Great. Yeah,
Have you seen it?
I have seen this film on VHS in the late 90s. So I don't have a lot of memories of it other than, like you said, that last scene is I definitely, as you were describing it, can play it back in my mind of that's what I remember in that movie. The final scene, everyone there eating that whole meal, and really that message of food bringing people together through all walks of life. And it wasn't, I also love Italian food, so it's cool it was Italian food, but it really that was not the point of that scene either. The food could have been anything. But that is the scene that definitely resonated a lot with me too. It's interesting when you talk about as well, like this evolution that you were having around food being like you were saying, too precious, or the looking down upon people that don't appreciate it. Was that something that you had always had, because again, I wasn't someone who grew up appreciating food. Was that part and parcel with appreciating food for you? And this is when you were like casting that off or starting to, or was this something that you kind of gained later in life and then we're starting to realize, well, maybe I could put this aside because it's not necessarily about that? Like, what was the evolution of that for you?
Yeah, more of the latter, because I think I watched this movie when I started to really take food seriously. But before then, not really. I didn't, I was sort of a passive appreciator, like I was saying. So this wasn't really a thing, but it started to become a thing a little bit later in life once I started to get into it.
Yeah. So I said my first exposure to this film, actually, I think I might have only seen it once, was on VHS in the late 90s. This movie was sort of talked about as like an indie darling around that time, which is why I rented it at the video store. How did you come across this? Like coming across it like 10 years after it came out. It's talked about still sometimes, but it's not very well known. Like what made you gravitate towards this film?
I don't remember, but maybe I was, specifically searching for food movies and must have read the plot description and seen, oh, Stanley Tucci, I've seen him in other stuff and loved other stuff. So let me just watch it. So I don't really remember, but that's probably what it might have been. But I'm so happy to have discovered it.
Yeah, no, it is a great film. And like I said, that last scene still definitely sits with me. I want to go watch that on YouTube after this. I'll look that up.
That's awesome. What's your number two?
Yeah, so my number two piggybacks kind of well off of your reasons for citing Big Night, but from the opposite perspective. Like I said, I didn't come from this background of being a foodie growing up, and there was always this distance I would place with, okay, those people are a little snotty, right, snooty. So this film,
I was one of them.
That's fine. Sure. this number two film really helped me like understand that no, it wasn't all about the pretense. There is something to this as well, which is 2007's Ratatouille, directed by Brad Bird, featuring Patton Oswalt as the voice of the rat. And this movie summary on IMDb: a rat who can cook makes an unusual alliance with a young kitchen worker at a famous restaurant. Very high level summary, but basically the premise of this film is there's a rat who loves to cook, even though everyone in his rat family, looks upon food as only something it's only for sustenance. All you need is food is just food to eat, and that's it. He sees food more of this art form and wants to express that as a chef. So for me, I think there's a couple messages in this film that really spoke to me when I saw it. The first one is the main message, I think, or the main takeaway of this film is the restaurant that the rat and then his friend Alfredo work in. The chef who founded that restaurant, his slogan or catchphrase or whatever we want to say was anyone can cook. That was what the ethos that he had was. And for me, I had always, I guess, put on a pedestal these, like, this is a French restaurant too, I should say. French cuisine is also looked upon as like perhaps the most snooty or highest form of these foodies. Oh, everyone loves French food, but if you don't understand it, you're looked down upon. So that message of, okay, well, if anyone can cook, it really makes it approachable. This cuisine, which again, I was not exposed to at all, French cuisine growing up. And it's only actually something even in recent years that I've grown to appreciate. I still find it sometimes difficult to get into French food. So that message really spoke to me, and I was like, oh, wow, like, okay, so that is something maybe I should not just look, in a way I was looking down upon, I guess, the snooty people for being snooty, which was my own judgment I was putting on them. So, you know what, French cuisine, forget about it. It's too, highfalutin. And this movie, I think, helped me understand that, like, no, like it's not about that. It's not about putting it on a pedestal or making food too precious. It's about just expressing yourself as a chef and as an artist in this way through the food. And then the second thing that really resonated with me a lot, and still the scene that plays back in my head frequently, as well, is there's a other character who's a critic, who's a food critic, who's really very snooty. He's the representation, I guess, of a self-important foodie. And there's the final scene in the film is he gets served at this restaurant a dish that is also it's an interpretation of Ratatouille, which is a French dish, but it's a French peasant dish. It's not seen as something that is a highfalutin dish that's really hard to make, but it's a very, very simple dish. And he takes a bite of it, expecting probably to not like it and to give the restaurant a bad review. And there's it's an instant flashback to him as a child, walking into a cottage. His mother's there cooking, making that ratatouille. And it's really very short scene, like maybe 5 or 7 seconds of this flashback. And you get the sense that the food is transporting him back to that moment, and having that memory of his mother is what that food is doing to him. And I guess I had never really looked at food as art before. And art is something I feel that, yes, the artist has an intent that he or she is expressing themselves in a certain way to say something. But as the consumer of the art, whether you're seeing a film or looking at a painting, or listening to music, you put your own, like, you're impacted by that in a very personal way. The filmmaker might have been trying to say something in the movie, but you interpret that your own way and you have your own personal interpretation. And I never really looked at food like that, or that it could do that, that it could be that expression of not only the chef's personality, but also a reflection of your own in a way when you're eating it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gone through a lot of those moments now of, thinking back to memories and having food be connected to those memories, different people, experiences that I've had. For example, like that pasta dish that I mentioned I had last night that was so great. It helped me flash back to a moment of being in Italy on a vacation, eating pasta by the coast. And it brought me back to that moment. It helped transport me there. And food I never saw as that vessel before I had seen this film. So it's really those two things, like that theme of kind of taking the pretense away from food, especially French food, and then also really understanding, food is an expression of art, not only by the chef, but you can interpret that in many different personal ways, was really an eye-opening thing for me. Like, as I was, again, moving away from eating more disposable and processed foods and starting to branch out, be a little more adventurous, this film really helped inspire me to even start appreciating food in a different way, which sounds like you had that appreciation since growing up, but I had to kind of get that myself as I got older, and this movie in 2007 definitely helped me do that. So I'm sure you've seen Ratatouille. I'm curious to get your thoughts.
Great movie. And funny enough, this is my number 2 as well.
Oh, great. Well, why don't you talk, and then we can discuss. I want to hear what you have to say about the film, and then we can talk about it together.
Yeah. For me, I think I'll just build on kind of a lot of what you said, but my angle or way into this movie was that this movie really unlocked that activation period, like I mentioned up top, of sort of starting to take food more seriously and being more actively engaged in it. And definitely the anyone can cook motto spoke to me a lot, because like I said, I never cooked anything until my late 20s, and that's sort of when I watched this movie. But then specifically, I think what it unlocked for me was the power of flavors and combinations. There's not a week that goes by that I don't think about those scenes when the Ratatouille the rat is like, Remy the rat, sorry, is eating strawberry and cheese and herbs and having this explosion of flavors and emotion in his mind. I still think about that scene when I'm cooking, when I'm out there grocery shopping or any store that is food related. I'm always smelling things and creating some sort of combination magic in my head. And I think this movie was the unlock for me. I don't think I was thinking about food in that fashion at all. I like good food. I appreciated it, was lucky to have it in my life, but I wasn't actively engaged in it. And I think this is what this movie did for me. It totally unlocked it. Not to mention, like, this movie is just so beautifully done. Like, this is my Pixar movie. Like, for a lot of people, Toy Story or The Incredibles, which I know you love, are movies that you keep coming back to. For me, this was my Pixar movie, in a way that it's classic Pixar ingredients, no pun intended, of great animation, emotion, beautiful score, well-informed characters, great storytelling in general. So yeah, Pixar is in my rotation list of movies that I revisit wholly or in part pretty much every year. And I think it's because of that unlocking of flavor combinations and truly getting into food in a real way. So I'm very happy that both of us have this on our list for similar but yet different reasons. So yeah, that's awesome. What is your number 1?
Yeah, so we've, this is an evolution of a journey for me of first sort of removing types of food from my diet. And then like we were just talking about Ratatouille, really for me, like removing the snotty nature of some high cuisine and really making me also connect emotions with food. My final pick is a film from this is like the final step I think in my journey. Film from 2010 called The Trip by Michael Winterbottom, starring Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon. The plot summary on IMDb: Steve Coogan has been asked by The Observer to tour the country's finest restaurants, but after his girlfriend backs out on him, he must make his best friend and source of eternal aggravation, Rob Brydon, go instead. So this film was is a movie, but it's a cut down version of a TV show. So the movie came out first in 2010 in the fall, and then the show was released later. It's like 6 episodes, so about an hour each. So it's like 6 hours of content edited into a 2-hour movie. And I saw the movie first, so I felt, even though I've seen the TV show and watched that as well, so I feel like this isn't necessarily cheating that it's a TV show and a movie. But for me, this movie, when it came out and when I saw it, so really helped me appreciate, I think, the high cuisine and this whole idea of like Epicurean food, like very, very good quality, rare, unique foods. So in this movie, they're this is a British film. So these are two British comedians playing themselves in fictionalized world. They're from London, but their tour is in Northern England. They're touring around each the 5 or 6 different restaurants. And these aren't like, these are very like unique restaurants that each chef, like most of these are Michelin star. They're in little cottage towns or in a small little hotel in Airbnb and not Airbnbs, B&Bs in Northern England. And they're very, very interesting, unique foods that they're eating that I have not gotten exposed to anything like this growing up, or even in Los Angeles. I wasn't that adventurous in terms of the types of cuisine that I'd be eating. They'd go into these places and there'd be usually like a prefix meal of several different courses, paired with wine, really seeing all of that experience. And the food just looks fantastic when you see it and how they're shooting it. But then also, it's not really about the food. Like neither of them are actual food critics or foodies at all. They're there just to, in a way, like enjoy each other's company. So it's filmed in this very like documentary style. Michael Winterbottom, he's known for that anyway. And it's a lot of just kind of like letting the camera sit there on them as they eat. A lot of it is improvised dialogue between the two of them. So you really do feel like you're in there in a natural conversation amongst two good friends. And that, again, is what food really does mean to me too. It's like sitting down, having a great meal, interesting meal that, some of their dialogue is about the food and how interesting it is, the different things that they're doing, but a lot of it's just about them and their own lives and bonding over food. And one of the reasons why I do love going out to eat and love restaurants and experimentation and trying different things is a lot of how cool it looked in this movie. Just kind of be there, experiencing this together with someone else. Because that is really what food means to me as well. Like you mentioned, that scene from Big Night of people breaking bread and sharing that experience. To me, that really is what food is. I think this movie captures it in a really, really great way. So it really did turn me on to this whole, high quality, rare, unique food set. But yeah, this movie and really more so the show and all the sequels definitely for sure has shaped the last 10 years of my evolution to being someone who can appreciate food in this way.
What a great pick. I sort of had a sense that you might have this on your list because I remember hearing you talk about it. I love this movie too. I love both of them. You hit it on the head that this movie really exemplifies connection, friendship, the bonds you make with people over food. I also think this is a great travel movie, which is another, for me, like a great parallel thread with food. Just the way family connection, friend connection is one part, the other part is travel. And every time I travel, sure, I'll see the monuments and the sights on the way, but usually what I plan for is where am I eating? And it's a mixed bag of places that are hole in the wall places, but also something special, and everything in between. And I think this movie really captures that as well. In fact, I think I watched the finale of this trilogy or however movies they are last year during the pandemic, locked up in New York, and it was a great way to like vicariously live through them and just romanticize and imagine what life used to be and what life could be. It was a great antidote of sorts during that time. It made me so happy. But the first one is definitely the best one in my mind because it's so fresh and one of a kind in a way. So very happy that this is on your list.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the travel part of it too, which I think comes in more in play, at least for me, in the subsequent films, because they're on a trip here, but they are British. So in the other seasons, when they go to Greece and Spain and Italy, it is more of that trip. And I do associate food a lot with trips. Like when I go on travel, especially to other countries, I'm there to experience everything, including the food. And I want to find good food, interesting food. That is something I think that, maybe 20 years ago, 20, 30 years ago, I wouldn't have had that type of desire on a vacation or on my travel. It really is because of this evolution that I've been on. And now that this movie is a big part of that for sure. So cool. What is your number one movie that made you a foodie?
Mm-hmm. So my number one movie is Julie and Julia from 2009. The IMDb description is Julia Child's story of her start in the cooking profession is intertwined with blogger Julie Powell's 2002 challenge to cook all the recipes in Julia Child's first book. So it's basically two parallel stories. Meryl Streep plays Julia Child and Amy Adams plays Julie Powell. They're set in totally different times, obviously, one in the 40s in Paris and in Europe, and the other in Queens, New York, right after 9/11. And it's sort of this great, beautiful storyline of these two women finding their purpose through food, and also in a way underlining the love that they share with their husbands, who are amazingly supportive and very much part of this whole journey. So why this movie is my number one is because this is the movie that I feel like where it all began for me when it comes to my active relationship with food. I think Ratatouille got me started and got me thinking, but this movie kind of really pushed me all the way. So for context, I watched this movie when I just moved to Los Angeles after my grad school here in the Bay Area. I'd been there for about, I think, 3-4 months. I barely knew anybody in LA. This is before you and I had met. And I just was feeling a little bit fish out of water, work was new, no real friends, this massive, expansive city that felt really overwhelming. And I watched this movie and it somehow spoke to me in a personal way that, oh, what if I started to cook, and follow some cookbook and that could be a purpose. It started in a very sort of trivial way to just keep me engaged and keep me happy because I always cared about food, like we've been talking. So I was like, sure, why not? So I went to Barnes and Nobles when one used to go to those places in the cooking aisle. And I had heard, or maybe me and my sister or mom had conversations about Jamie Oliver, who's a British chef. And I just randomly picked his book. The book looked beautiful. The recipes looked really tasty, kind of world cuisine, but I would say with a bit of an Italian bent. And I just started cooking through it, not necessarily every recipe, but just here and there. And it kind of lit up my life. I couldn't wait every day to get back home and cook what I was cooking next. And it kind of just unlocked from there on. I ended up taking a French cooking class in LA for 5 months, started cooking, started having people over. I owe it a lot to this movie for getting that started in me. But I think I've been thinking a lot about as to why did this movie do this to me? And I think it is about that there's really no age or time in your life where you can find a purpose. And Julia Child was in her 40s and had done odd jobs here and there, and had no desire or ambition of being something, what she ended up becoming, and just sort of found her way through this. So I think that really spoke to me, that we can always find our purpose no matter what. I also think this movie does a great job in showing that whatever your passion might be, whatever it is that you're interested in, you have to spend time on it. You have to be persistent. There's so many scenes of them messing it up, whatever they're cooking. Amy Adams' character is having meltdowns often in her small little kitchen in Queens, trying to prepare stuff, and it's not going well. Or Julia Child's book with her co-authors, it takes many, many attempts to get it published because that book is unpublishable in the beginning. It's so huge, they almost scrap it and then restart. So I love that part of as well, that it could be applicable to one dish that you're making or just life in general. Whatever your passion might be, you have to stay with it. So I think that really spoke to me. I think we touched a lot on sharing food with the people you love. And the scenes in this movie of Julia Child and Paul Child, played by Meryl Streep and Stanley Tucci, just reveling over food and just going speechless because something just tastes so delicious and beautiful. I can't get enough of those scenes. And it reminded me of, my time with my family, going out and eating and just, feeling that feeling of blissfulness of enjoying what we were eating. And since then, this has carried on with friends and dinners we've had. Robert, who's my boyfriend, with him, he may not be as big of a foodie, but he does love good food. And nothing gives me more joy when I've made something that he appreciates, or we go out and we've gotten something and he appreciates this. An instant kind of lightning moment for me when that happens to people that I love and care. And I think this movie really captures that. And then last but not the least, I think this movie also marks my obsession slash fascination slash love affair with Meryl Streep. I'd only watched, I think, Devil Wears Prada before this. That was the last movie I'd seen before I left India to come to the US, and really enjoyed the movie. I'd heard her name, but I never watched any of her stuff before. And then a year or two later, watched this movie and just couldn't believe my eyes that it was the same person, and was just so transfixed by it, and then made a vow to go and watch everything that she'd done. And I sort of did that in the next few years, and rest is history. And I'm sure she's going to come up a lot in our podcast in various ways, in my love for movies and how movies have shaped me. But I think this movie is also seminal in that sense. And then in closing, I think this movie now has become the movie I watch when I move to a new city or a new apartment, and the furniture is set up, the kitchen is set up. I would usually open a good bottle of wine. I'm pretty tired to really cook anything. I'd order something in, and the movie that I'm playing is this one. It's sort of become my own personal housewarming movie. Of course, I watch it, otherwise as well, but that is now a tradition because I have moved a bunch in the last, 10, 12 years. So it's carried on with me in that sense that, life is okay. We are here now. And I think there's a line that Amy Adams says that there's something beautiful that if you whisk eggs, sugar, chocolate, and flour, it's all going to work. And that's the feeling I get in watching this movie, even though it's corny as hell, but I love it.
Nice. Wow. I mean, I knew you loved this movie. I didn't actually realize that it was your, like the cornerstone of your Meryl Streep appreciation, that was kind of starting that. And everyone does, or not everyone, I should say, most people do have that like film that they watch, like when they first set up their new TV or move. And that's great that this movie does all those things for you. So I'm not surprised to hear it's on your list or at number one. I didn't realize how special that this film was to you until hearing this. Is really, really cool. So for me, I'd seen the film on television the first time. So maybe like a year or two after it came out. Did not see it in theaters.
Me
What I took
neither.
away from it was just a new appreciation, or not a new, just an appreciation for Julia Child. Like she was, I just knew her as a pop culture figure. I had no idea what she kind of did, what the impact that she had was on cooking in the United States. You know, bringing French cooking to the U.S. To just suburban America. I just did not realize that at all until this film. And then the other message I got from it was something you touched on too, that it's like never too late to find your passion, but you stick with it, persistence, like those two things. Like you just stick with it. It doesn't matter when you start, you stick with it, and you'll be able to succeed or get what you need out of that, which is just great life advice. So those are the main two things that I took away from it. But it's a delightful film. I think it's really fun. Both performances are fantastic. I'm a big fan of Amy Adams as an actress too, and I think this is one of her better performances actually in a film. And I love how you have two Stanley Tucci's on your list. You must associate food a lot with him.
I didn't even think about that until you pointed that out, but that is true. And it's funny because he now kind of has a career in food as well. Like
Oh,
he's
right.
written a bunch of cookbooks, and through the pandemic, he was making cocktails, and I was following his Instagram stories and such. So, and has a great CNN food show based in Italy. So, yeah, I guess that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that's right. He has sort of changed into or he's shown his foodie side, for sure, which is interesting. And he must have had that. I mean, he clearly had that all along. Wrote Big Night, or co-wrote that film. That this must have been a passion for his, and it's fun to see. I mean, again, like never too late in life, right? Now he's discovering this new side of him and becoming more of maybe a food celebrity than an actor at this point,
Yeah,
which is fun.
totally. And also, like, it's interesting. I have two movies on my list that are about French cuisine. And it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting to compare and contrast how you were talking about French cuisine. To me, it was more of like, oh my gosh, like, I don't think I understand this and I would be made fun of, because this cuisine is so up there. It was less, not so much of what you were saying that you kind of almost looked down upon the snootiness of it. It was more of like, oh my gosh, they're not going to let me in. So for me, these movies, because they show that, to going back to the point that you made, the details of creating all this stuff, and it's actually all about flavors and the artist's expression, it sort of made this cuisine accessible to me. And since going to Paris and France, seeking out places that are referenced here, or other great food travelers have talked about, was such a joy to actually go there and eat a great croissant or taste a great beurre blanc sauce the way it's supposed to be made. And yes, it might come with a little bit of snootiness, but if it works, it works, and there's nothing like it. Um,
Totally. Yeah. I mean, French, you're in France, you can eat even just a piece of bread, and it's like the best piece of bread you ever had. Like even the thing I love about French cuisine too is, yes, it can be complicated and interesting, but it can also be just dead simple. Like the simplest things that they do is also just incredible. Some of the best meals I've had have been in different parts of France. But yeah, it is interesting to see how we both viewed French cuisine in this kind of different way. And like for me, Ratatouille especially sort of removed that veneer of snootiness and made it accessible for me to then be like, you know what, I'm not going to look down upon this anymore. Like I can experience this and not feel like that I'm entering some club that I don't want to be in, versus you approaching it as you feel like you wouldn't be able to be in the club even if they let you in, and you were kind of scared about that. So just interesting that we were approaching it in two different ways, and that similar films helped us get beyond those fears actually that we had, or judgments that we had about the food, to now both be huge fans of it.
Yeah,
Fun.
no, absolutely. Well, any honorable mentions or movies that didn't make it on your list before we say goodbye?
Yeah, there were a couple that I was thinking may or may not be included in here, that didn't. The first three or there were three that are just the sequels to The Trip. this Italy, Spain, and Greece. And the reason why these were not included is once I saw that first film and then watched the TV show, I actually skipped watching all the subsequent films and just watched the TV show because it's the same, just longer. So I felt I couldn't put either of those episodes or those movies on there because I actually haven't seen them technically. Also, for me, part of eating and my love of food runs parallel to my love of wine too. So there's some wine films that I think also contributed a lot to this too, like Psalm, a documentary from 2012, Sideways from 2004. These two films, though more about wine than necessarily food, but I associate wine so much with food and that whole experience, they almost made the list. And then the last one was a documentary, Jiro Dreams of Sushi from 2011, just a fantastic film. Those are the ones that I was almost thinking of putting on, but didn't make the cut. What about you?
Yeah, no, those are all good picks. It's funny. I had Sideways too. I almost put it as my number three. I actually rewatched it this week in preparation for the movie. And though the movie's parts around appreciation for wine and the connection that Paul Giamatti has with, what's her name? The actress that he's in love with. Anyway, now it's going to bother both of us because we can't think of her. But those scenes are incredible because they're really about their connection with wine and how they're discovering each other through that. And I love that part. But I somehow, maybe this is my feeling, that the movie has not aged super well in my mind, where all the deeds that Thomas Hayden Church's character does, they're almost underscored with this comedic, funny score, which kind of makes all the things that he's doing sort of very, very, forgivable and passable and what have you, even though he's done some pretty shitty things in that movie. And I mean, to each their own, of course, but I think the score, the way it presented that, kind of really ruined it for me. In fact, to the point that I don't know if I can go back and watch this movie anymore. So I'm very sad that I've maybe lost the love of this movie, at least for now. So that was one big one. There are parts of Eat, Pray, Love, especially when Julia Roberts is in Italy, which is the eat section. It's amazing. The rest of the movie is, whatever. But so that's why that's not on the list. That was my number two. And then number three, was also Jiro Dreams of Sushi.
Similar
many,
films.
many more, I'm sure, to look at and consider. Oh, actually, also Last Holiday, the great Queen Latifah movie as well. All right. So, well, that's our episode. Thank you all for listening, and hope you enjoyed the discussion and learned something about yourself today, or at the very least, have some new movies to check out, or actually some new dishes to check out. Or hopefully you're just hungry after listening to this episode, because we sure are.
Definitely.
Well, goodbye until next time.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm definitely going to go off and maybe some French food tonight. That's what I feel like I'm in the mood for. See you later, Karan.
See you later, Alex. Bye.